eclipse hold 20 and 12 and the end shit like a Mayan calendar.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in the Americas. Japan was over here. China was over here. I mean, they were coming. Why do you think that place was so valuable? Because all nations were coming to the Americas and bringing their ideas and their trade. I mean, they were meeting in Mexico. That was the meeting place.
Was a slide from a place called Chichen Itza, where black people who look like us arresting the people that we call Native Americans, who they consider foreigners coming onto their land.
Bald-head black man. And this is the image of most Moors.
Civilizations here in America, man. We had whole civilizations.
People call them mixed texts and the Zapotecs.
See that Moorish chief and you will be looking exactly at Montezuma. He is fitting every description that they gave, and then he has his...
Native Americans today, look at them. They are Asians. You can't tell the difference between a Native American or a goddamn Chinaman.
I love my Lakota brothers and all my brothers and sisters out there, out west. But don't think that they're the only Indians. You know, people, you need to wake up. Get out of this whole vein of thinking that an Indian has got to look like a straight-haired, light-skinned, Hollywood Indian, because that's a creation of Hollywood. That's a creation of the white man.
This is from the Temple of Warriors in Chichen Itza. It cost me $600 to get this book. Why did it cost me $600 to get this book and they had to take it from the Smithsonian vault? This is showing a race of people in Mexico, all right, who are arresting the people who call themselves natives today. They put a special paint on these people so that they could recognize them, and these bars on their bodies and paint gave rise to the symbolism of a prisoner wearing bars, the barred uniform. So these people who are pale are calling themselves Mayans, and these right here are the Olmec Mayans or the She. All right? And so our identity here has been stolen. There was no slave trade yet in Chichen Itza when these were being made. Slavery came thousands of years later. How did these black people get here?
If you didn't walk backward, stay far. We're dealing with truths and rights. Come some more into my side.
Oldest Homo sapiens ever found on this land are from Brazil. The name that the archaeologists and anthropologists gave to the skeleton is Lucia, L-U-C-I-A. All right. Dr. Richard Neve of the University of Manchester did craniological studies on this entity and did a reproduction of the model of what Lucia would look like, and based on craniological studies, which is phenotype, he declared that she was anthropologically Negro. Period. I'm not even going to some of the other things that we could quote and highlight. I did that lecture on Silent of the TV when I did Indigenous Science versus Evolution. But my question to Henry Louis Gates is this: if you're going to measure the DNA of Native Americans, why don't you go get a sample from Lucia and get family tree DNA to get their archaeogenomic scientists to use that set of DNA to measure it up against all the people that you tested? Morgan Freeman, all right, Oprah, all these people that you tested. Take her set of genes and match it up against it. You are taking the Austronesian DNA of these pale groups, measuring it against ours and telling us we're not Native American. That was a part of the plot from the beginning.
Their mahogany skin shone through. Then he went. Let me get this point. He went on to say that these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations. Unquote. That's a quote that he made.
So that was the whole goal, was to try to bleach out, as they say.
Yeah, but it kind of tells you that first Americans were a rich brown people. They were mahogany in color. That these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations. That these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations. That these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations. That these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations.
Psychopath.
Came here, and those who ushered the whites here were Moors, and they are the ones who created New York. Now, you know, if in Shakespeare's plays and whatnot, and when they speak on Othello, it's interesting that Othello was over 6 feet tall, bald-head, black man. And this is the image of most Moors. Look at your movie stars. Almost all of them have a bald head. That almost all of them are 6 feet tall. Look at all of your rap artists. Almost all of them are from Jamaica. And why is that? Jamaica, the islands, Barbados, all of these islands that are not nowhere, you know, near being true Americans. Where did that come from? How did that take place? I'm going to tell you how it took place. When the Europeans came to our country, one of the interesting things that they did was they made pacts and covenants and treaties with the Moors. The Moors are the ones that told them how to get here. The Moors are the ones that was on the ships navigating them, showing them to this beautiful land. The Moors thought that they could make an agreement with these individuals and a pact with these Jews. See, a lot of times you hear one story about, well, America is made up of, out of all of the people that England kicked out. But the truth of the matter is, that's only a portion of what the Eurocentric American history is really about. It's really archaically about the Jews coming over here, and they are the ones that used the Moors to get here. The Moors existed and had a government way before supposedly even the Asians. The Mongoloids came here. The people that are known as Native Americans today, look at them. They are Asians. You can't tell the difference between a Native American or a goddamn Chinaman because they're the same fucking people. They are Mongoloid orientation. They came down through the Bering Straits. Now, nobody's denying this history, all right? Nobody's denying this anymore. But what they don't tell you about is the history of the Moors and how they established New York. They established almost all of that East Coast to be theirs. They established that. Have you ever noticed how the mentality of a New York nigga is? The average New York nigga, the average New Jersey nigga, always and always have had Moorish mentality, which is cutthroat. They will cut your throats and not give a damn about you.
Christopher Columbus, the guy that captained who was the navigator of his lead ship, was a Moor. Nino, Alonso, whatever the brother name was.
They also called him an African.
He was a Moor.
They called him an African.
He was a Moor.
You had a lot of Moors that come over here with the Caucasian. Matter of fact, it was the Moors who brought the Caucasian over here. They were Moors who got off them boats with Columbus Neil and De Soto Neil. Them were black folk. That's what we call black folk today. It was a Moor who led Lewis and Clark. But he was a Cherokee. The Cherokee had came over way before the European, and they had been here a long time. Probably about 10,000 years or so.
A lot of the Moors, especially the Spanish Moors, invaded this continent with Columbus and also De Soto. De Soto had Spanish Africans with him on his Native American raid. Go read the book of Chesto Menendez. You think it's Spanish, but if you go and read it, you will find out he was a Spanish African. He was a Moor. I'm not friends with the Moors from that perspective. I know their history. You came in raping and enslaving Native American people in South Carolina. It's in the congressional records.
Civilizations here in America, man. We had whole civilizations. The East Coast was inhabited by, one type of native close to the, the Iroquois and what have you. The Midwest area was inhabited by a mixture of, black indigenous people, Mongoloid indigenous people, but the Southeast was almost exclusively inhabited by black indigenous people. And at one time, there was even a distant outpost of the Aztec culture in the southeastern United States, and they traded with the Aztecs that were in Mexico. Matter of fact, go Google a picture of the last two full-blooded Aztecs and tell me what you find. Tell me what you find. You go see two people that you know are black. Go Google it. In 1515, when Hernan Cortez got here, there were another group of natives, Mongoloid natives, that had got sick of centuries of domination at the hands of the Aztecs that were black. And so when they saw these white men coming on the shore, they gladly ushered them up to the gates of Tenochtitlan. They did it gladly, so they can get these black dudes off their damn neck. It is what it is. They made a strategic decision or whatever. They opened the door for the white man, but hey, look where it's got the world now.
Once Christopher Columbus was able to come to the Americas, he was able to engage in what they call, he was searching for resources. That's all it really was. He was coming here for resources, because you have to understand that in Spain at the time, right, the Moors have been ruling for 700 years, 800 years. After the fall of Rome, the Goths came in, the different Gothic tribes came in, and they were the Vandals, people we call Vandals and things like that. They came in, and at 710, certain delegates from what we call Iberia and that would be certain Christian groups, certain Jewish groups sent for the Moors to come to Iberia to put, the smackdown on the Europeans. And that brings us up to the Moorish rule from 711 to 1492, which fell after the signing of this agreement. Now, there are many educated scholars who speak on this. It's just that we don't study these aspects of our history. So all this sounds foreign and crazy to people, but I can validate all this via paperwork and things of that nature. So when we talk about Columbus, he discovered America for a certain group of Europeans, certain nations that didn't have access to the world prior to 1491. When Columbus arrived in the Americas, right, he didn't come to mainland North America. He arrived at the Caribbean islands, right? When Columbus described the people he saw, he described them as what you would say Negro. But every Columbus Day, they will show you a picture of an amalgamated Native American from the Western territories talking about what Columbus did to their people. Columbus never met their people, never touched their people. Columbus dealt with the tribes in the Caribbean. The first tribes to be assaulted were the tribes in the Caribbean and on the East Coast and in South America. None of these were these amalgamated tribes that we see in the Midwest. None of them. They did not come into contact with the European until decades later. I got all the information right here. Honestly, I don't feel like going into who are they descendants of? They will be descendants of the Mongoloids that migrated here over the Bering Strait.
For some reason, if you're this color, that's what is supposed to be your story, regardless of whether you was born here or not. And that is a problem, because what that does is it gives us a false sense of inferiority, and it gives another people a false sense of superiority. When these people that they talk about who are Native Americans and Grand Chieftains today, talking about the ones that's opening the casinos and all this other stuff, they are all descendants of people from Tartary. And how can we prove this? This is because way back in the days, there was an empire in ancient China called the Xiang Dynasty. And the Xiang decided, under a man named Hu Xian, another Moor, decided to come over here and find their cousins, who they referred to as the Western Ixi, or Ixe, or Yi. And so when they came here, they found an Olmecs here that was already here from time immemorial, and they both merged their culture. When that culture merged together, they became one people. And then out of that people, we get the people today we call the Hopi, the Anasazi, the so-called Pueblo cultures, and all of that, right? It wasn't until maybe 16,000 years later, when the Hindus was exiled from India by the Sindhi Moors, or the Moors from Old Bombay and all of that, kicked them out. After the Hindu invasions, they all was brought over in boats and brought over here. When they came here, they then mixed with the so-called Autochthon, or Aboriginal people, who were already here, and then those Aboriginal people allowed them to stay in a certain area, and they adopted them into certain aspects of the culture. This is where you get people called the Mixtecs and the Zapotecs and the Toltecs and these type of people. They were all descendants from the Olmecs. Now the Olmec people, the original constituency, started to move further up. They started to move further up from La Venta, Palenque, Chichen Itza, and move further up into what we would now call the Midwestern United States, and then further, and then after a certain amount of time, they dwelled there and then started to disperse into sub-tribes and nations. Some of those sub-tribes and nations, one of the biggest one was called the Yamasee. I don't know if any people saw the movie Apocalypto, but in that movie there was a blue dye that they were painting the people who were going to be sacrificed in. That blue dye actually comes from red clay that's found in Georgia, the red clay in Georgia. And it was an old custom that the queens would ingest some of the red clay in Georgia, because it would help with the magical properties that they were trying to pass on to the babies. And a lot of Autochthon people still do that to this day. So what happened was the Yamasee Nation basically... What had happened was the Yamasee Nation established themselves in what we call Georgia and all that. And then like one of the sub... And then one of the... I'm sorry.
And one of the sub... I'm sorry.
And then one of the sub-nations called the Southern Cree and then the Northern Creek decided to go against and fight the Yamasee. There was a big war between that, and then the Yamasee basically lost the war, and their women were then brought in as squaws, meaning captured queens, to populate with the Cree, the Northern Cree, and the Southern Creek. And once they had those babies, that became another nation now. That nation was then known as the Seminole. And then the Seminole were then given land back down in what we right here call Andalusia, and they came back down here.
Chicago, right here, where the Wrigley building is. A young fellow by the name of Jean-Baptiste de Sable. Jean-Baptiste, he founded Chicago, when he traded with the Indians. And of course, there it is right at that particular time. It was called Chicago, or Stinking Onion, by the Indians. And de Sable, he didn't even change the name at all.
Records of Europeans and their descriptions unveiled the fraud of this perception. In 1619, John Brown, the first English explorer, described the color of the people. When he landed on the eastern shore of America in Jamestown, Virginia, he described Powhatan, the Algonquin chief, he had encountered to look more like a devil, he states, with some 200 or more men as black as himself. In the books, Letters and Notes on the North American Indigenous People of North America, written in 1841 by author George Cartlin, a noted ethnographer, describes American Indigenous People of North America as all primitive tribes known in America are dark copper-colored with jet black hair, while most possess curls in the extreme, which today is considered nappy hair, and every level of wavy hair in between. The texture of the hair is generally fine, soft or silk, or coarse and harsh. Catlin also noted the hair of the men falling down to the hams and sometimes to the ground is divided into plaits or slabs 2 inches wide and filled with a profusion of glue and earth, which becomes very hard and remains unchanged from year to year. Today, this form of hair is called locks.
Pyramid on the Nile in Northeast Africa doesn't have stair steps going up it. It doesn't have temples on top of its summits. They could not go and break through the boat on the temples atop those great pyramids. There are none there. And that was the clue that Egypt was writing about the Americas. And the deeper I got into the records, the clearer it got. They started actually saying, and because Amun loved that land so much, he said it's his beloved land, and that word was Mary, the beloved, Mary, M-E-R-I, Mary. And the land, of course, as before, is Ta. So you have the land, the beloved land, Ta Mary. And they kept that name and just put the Ta on the end of it. So Ta Mary became a Mary Ta. We simply say AmeriKKA. We kept the name that Egypt gave to the Americas. So that was the big mystery behind that $10 million map that Martin Waltzmuller made and then put the name America on it in 1507. And then those who knew and those who were trying to hide things said, wait a minute, you can't put that name on here. And the next time he reprinted that map, it was off. It was gone. Because that's the name that Egypt had given the land, Tamari. That's where America came from. So now I have Egypt writing about the Americas, but they go further. They don't just talk about we named the Americas. They say it where it was. They said our founders, Amen, Osiris, Isis, all of these, of course, they use those other names, you know, the Asa and the Asat. And so they said they are in the West. And all over the monuments, they talked about Osiris and said he is foremost of the Westerners, which means not in the front of, he was the most worshipped throughout in the West. And not just his dead spirit, they were talking about the man himself being in the West. So now I have those records. And the deeper I got, the clearer it became. And then I started locating the cities all through the Americas. And not North America. Egypt says, man, those, they didn't call them Indians, but they said their cavalry is just so strong. They have bow and arrow cavalry. They are on horseback, and they are so strong, it's just devastating to us to try to take that land. So I tell you what, we're going to cut it right off at that river, and that's why all these pyramids are showing up from Mexico going down south, because those Apaches and Comanches and whatever other tribes were there, black tribes and others, were whooping Egypt something fierce.
A few weeks ago, a guy was digging a pool in his backyard in downtown area of New Orleans. You see, New Orleans was smaller one time, and this area was country. And they hit 6 feet down. They hit a casket. They said, "What's a casket doing here?" It was a cypress casket, cypress wood. Now, you know, when you dig down more than a foot or two in New Orleans, you're going to hit water. Cypress is a tree that's grown in a swamp. Does not rot. The cypress casket has been good for a few hundred years. They found black Indian inside with black artifacts, Indian artifacts. Okay? They said, well, let's dig north instead of that right here. They went north, hit caskets. South, hit them. East, hit them. West, hit them. They found that there's a graveyard, an ancient graveyard that's almost a mile in north, south, east, and west, almost a mile apart, almost. And they found out that since when they weren't able to go any further laterally, like we did graves, they started digging down, one on top of the other. And they have found so far 20,000 graves, black Indians.
Wow.
Okay? And this is about to hit. It hasn't hit. This happened a few weeks ago. You haven't heard on news yet, but it's going to hit the news because it's going to leak out. They're hushing it right now.
Because that's a creation of Hollywood. That's a creation of the white man.
The difference between us and them, we us, and they them. And that's that.
That was popping to the point where Kankan Musa and Abu Bakari set up a system that basically bankrupted all of the old dynasties that existed in so-called Africa, and then set up the expeditions that the Malian Empire would then extend further into the western portion of Mali, which they now call Mexico. So between 1321 and 1511, you had the rise and influx of all of these other Moors that were coming here also to combat the Spanish annexation of all of the colonies, that Moorish cities and colonies that they was trying to take over.
Stands right now. And you've got this black man, if you've ever seen this piece of art called the Moorish Chief, I'm going to tell you right now, they said they don't know who that man is modeled after, but when you understand the descriptions of Montezuma, this African that they call Montezuma, you will see that Moorish chief and you will be looking exactly at Montezuma. He is fitting every description that they gave, and then he has this little secret thing about it. When you look on his head, you see he's got this white cowl on his head, and underneath that white cowl is a little small red cap. Now, they'll try to say that's about the assassins or the assassins. No, you got to understand, Mexico is Lower Egypt. That's where Memphis was, and when you're the king of Memphis, your crown is red. And I'm thinking they're trying to show him secretly that this is Montezuma. They said Montezuma is this medium-built man, and they talked about the beard that he has that's shaped, and they're talking about he's black, and then others said very dark complected. And I'm looking at the Moorish chief, and I'm not seeing anything that does not agree with the descriptions that they give of Montezuma. And I'm saying, well, now we got a problem. Aztecs are Indians. That's what I was told. But now I've got Martha Malaku's education under my belt, and in the book of Ivan Van Sertima, he talks about those 2 expeditions, those 2 voyages of ships that came out of Senegambia. He's talking about those 500 ships and those 2,000 ships that went across in 1306 and again in 1311 looking for the first group of ships, or about those years. Now, we have those ships coming across the Atlantic from West Africa, and then they say there is no record of what happened to them, except now I'm in the Americas. I'm at Mexico. I'm looking in the records that the friars put together when they talked to these Africans there whose histories were being destroyed as soon as they took over that land. They were just burning them in the street, piling up the books. And yet, here is this friar, here's this Bernardino Sahagún who's come in and he's earned their trust, and they say, well, we got a couple of books they didn't get. And so he's recreating the histories that Spain and the church thought they had destroyed. And so he's rewriting them all over again, and he's showing these Aztecs as blacks with African features. And now it gets a little better, because he's also talking about the conversation that Montezuma had with Cortez. And now here is Cortez also putting in his journal the conversation he had with Montezuma. And here's Castillo. He's putting in the conversation that Cortez had with Montezuma. And here are these other writers, and they're putting in this conversation that Montezuma is having with Cortez. And I thought it was unbelievable that Montezuma is sitting right there, this black African in this Moorish clothing with this little red cap on, because he's really the king of Memphis. And he's sitting there and he says, well, you know, my father and my grandfathers say that we are not of this land. He said very clearly to Cortez, we are strangers here. We come across that sea in ships, and we landed at the city of Panuco, right south of Texas, and we came in, and people really didn't want to have much to do with us, but we found out how to work politics, and we started making some alliances, and before they knew it, we had become the most powerful group, and now we are the powerful group. And then we came and we found this island and built our capital on it in 1325 A.D. Now, we have 500 ships and then 2,000 ships leaving out of West Africa. In 1306, 1311, they're crossing the Atlantic. Nobody knows what happened to them. And here the Aztecs are saying, and we arrived about that same time in our ships coming from over there where the sun rise. And we came in, and now they're being painted in their books as blacks, as Africans.
You know, the Mexican people always believe that the origin of the people in this country, it is Asian, right? Sí. We say the last ice age, right? Sí. 25,000 years ago, the land bridge, Aleutian Islands, and the people going through the
Bering Strait.
Bering Strait, right?
Asians. The Mongoloids came here. The people that are known as Native Americans today, look at them. They are Asians. You can't tell the difference between a Native American or a goddamn Chinaman, because they're the same fucking people. They are Mongoloid orientation. They came down through the Bering Straits. Now, nobody's denying this history All right? Nobody's denying this anymore.
You know, black indigenous people were already here first, all over North America, South America, and they were gradually invaded and overtaken by the Mongoloid natives, what you think of as a Native American, of course. But there were two different types of Native Americans living here in America before Amerigo Vespucci, Columbus, or any other Caucasian ever came here, or even before the Moors started coming here, for that matter. Etc. And all of these skeletons, for the most part, have one thing in common: that they were of a phenotype that wasn't suspected would have been living here in America. And the phenotype that they were closely resembled the natives on Vanuatu and the Australian Aborigines. And one can only postulate from this, and the archaeologists that found this also, you know, theorized that basically these, you know, black indigenous people were already here first, all over North America, South America, and they were gradually invaded and overtaken by the Mongoloid natives, what you think of as a Native American, of course. But there were two different types of Native Americans living here in America before Amerigo Vespucci, Columbus, or any other Caucasian ever came here, or even before the Moors started coming here, for that matter.
Another black group, a pre-Columbian black group in the Americas, mostly along the West Coast, California, what is now Acapulco, of a black group of people who do not trace their ancestry to Africa. No one can understand where these people have come from. None of them survive anymore. They do not exist. They have been either bred out of existence, or they were the victims of disease or whatever. However, with this new DNA testing, which is now, in other words, all the DNA of every group in the world is now fed into a computer. A computer then can make correspondences, comparisons between every other group. This black group, which they found traces of in the Americas, matches, strangely enough, with Micronesia on the other side of the Pacific, to a people called the Negritos. These are black people who trace their origins not east from Africa, but westwards across the Pacific. Now that leaves a tremendous problem. How is it possible that these Negritos, or their ancestors, could have possibly come across the vast expanse of the Pacific to come here?
What would become the United States? Near Santa Barbara, California, a tribe called the Chumash has been building this type of sewn plank canoe since at least 1000 AD, calling it a tomolo'o. Linguists say that's how the Chumash would have pronounced the Eastern Central Polynesian word for the same boat, one they call a tumura'au.
They would have trouble pronouncing that and would come out tomolo'o. That's very normal, regular in Chumash.
The Chumash are thought to have started using the word tomolo'o sometime between 500 and 1200 AD. But it's more than the word for this canoe that's important. It's also the canoe itself, which has a design that turns out to be rare, very rare.
Once the planks were created, there would be holes drilled. We have holes on opposing edges of the planks, and those that were sewn together using this vegetable product-based cordage. That's a common technology throughout all of Polynesia. And it's only seen in 2 places in the entire native New World, coast of Southern California and the coast of Chile.
Common words, common engineering, and there's more. Fish hooks. This is Dr. Yosahiko Shinoto, a veritable expert on fish hooks who studied them all over the Pacific. He has a collection of primitive fish hooks found off Catalina Island near Los Angeles.
Looks like shapes cross some of the late Tahitian types.
The Catalina fish hooks seem to match fish hooks made in Tahiti around 1000 AD. Fishing for food is one way they could have survived a 4,000-mile voyage from the center of Polynesia to California. But what do Dr. Maximenko's maps of ocean currents say about all of this?
For a Polynesian voyage from Cook Islands to Santa Barbara area in California, the path would require nearly 300 days. That voyage would imply a lot of paddling. And if they were able to do that, they could make it.
Timbuktu accumulated navigational maps and logs from geographers throughout the world. During the 10th century, stories began to surface of sailors reaching a distant land. One of the first accounts came from a 10th century historian named Ali al-Masudi, an accomplished geographer, philosopher, and natural scientist. He wrote a book called In the Meadows of Gold and Quarries of Jewels. In it, he tells the story of a young man from Spain named Kashkash ibn Said, who crossed the Atlantic Ocean, made contact with people on the other side, and returned in the year 889 AD. Al-Masudi wrote, Kashkash gathered a group of young men and went on a voyage on this ocean. He returned with a fabulous booty. Every Spaniard knew his story. By the 12th century, the world's best-known geographer, Muhammad al-Idrisi, was also telling stories of sailors crossing the Atlantic. Al-Idrisi had created the most accurate map of the world in pre-modern time. His book, The Delight of Him Who Desires to Journey Through the Climates, is a geographical encyclopedia containing detailed maps and information on European countries, Africa, and Asia. The Book of Roger, which was drawn by al-Idrisi in 1154 for King Roger II of Sicily, contained legends written in Arabic and was copied by geographers for 3 centuries without alteration. In his book, al-Idrisi told stories of a Moorish ship which had crossed the Atlantic around 800 AD. He added validity to the reports recorded by other Muslim historians and geographers concerning Muslim seamen and navigators crossing the Atlantic Ocean. He also wrote about Portuguese seamen who crossed the Great Sea. A group of sailors traveled into the Sea of Darkness from Lisbon in order to discover what was in it and to what extent were its limits. They finally reached an island that had people who spoke Arabic. This astonishing historical report not only describes contact between Muslim seamen and the native people of the Americas, but suggests a strong familiarity between the two. By the 14th century, West Africa had seen the rise of the Mali Empire, one of the largest in the world during that time. The king of Mali was Mansa Abu Bakari, who was the nephew of the empire's founder, Sundiata Keita. As a young man, Abu Bakari heard stories of a land across the Atlantic and dreamed of sailing off into the massive ocean. While studying at Sankore University, Abu Bakari encountered maps from Muslim geographers such as al-Masudi and al-Idrisi, who had concluded that the Atlantic Ocean was not the western edge of the world. He learned about ocean currents, studied navigational charts, and also heard amazing tales of Sudanese people who had ventured across the Atlantic some 2,000 years earlier. Abu Bakari had been assured by learned professors and Arab geographers that new lands lay on the other side of the Great Green Ocean. Sometime around 1304, Abu Bakari assembled a fleet of ships and sent them west across the Atlantic in search of the new land. Accounts of the expedition are documented in a book by 14th century Arab historian Al-Umari. According to his writings, Mansa Abu Bakari launched 200 ships filled with men and a further 200 ships amply stocked with food, gold, and water to last for 2 years. African griots, who are known as the oral historians of African civilization, tell the story of one of those ships returning and informing Abu Bakari of their journey. The captain told him of their success in reaching a beautiful new land. Upon the news, the African ruler would gather a fleet of 2,000 ships, which he would lead himself. Ready were his best sailors, farmers, and carpenters, and in the year 1311 he would hand over the government and the title of Mansa to his brother Kankan Musa and fulfill his lifelong dream to sail across the Atlantic.
People from what was then the Mali Empire took off. It's almost certain they took off. The big debate is whether they arrived in the Americas. You see. So there's a considerable agreement that they took off in order to cross the Atlantic.
want to see a ship here in the Americas, go to Bonampak, go into that end room, and you'll see a man standing there with lines going across the wall above his head, and you don't know it, but that's Agamemnon's ship that's been painted there. And nobody has told anything about it. I gave it to National Geographic 2 years ago. So they went in and got the Black King out of it and announced that story earlier this year, but they still didn't announce to you that this was an African city and that the discovery came from African records that showed this city, showed those paintings, and named every one of those black painted people in that temple to be the ancient Greeks and ancient Trojans of antiquity. All black. Trojans, all black. Greeks, all black. Agamemnon sitting there, black, with his Zulu, with his Zulu clothing on, and Achilles right behind him with his. And that's Achilles' son whose tomb they went into and pulled those skeletons and started messing with them and all that crap. You know, that was Achilles' son buried in that tomb, as the ancient African writings told. That's how they found the tomb. Because I gave them the ancient writings to try to start getting this stuff published into our schools so our kids could get this information, and it wouldn't just be a couple of brothers on the corner in Harlem, you know, debating about knowledge. They could start having it in the textbooks, but apparently even that was not good enough. So even after they found the tomb to verify the writings and what the writings were said, you still didn't hear the story about the blacks in the empire, which is ancient Delphi in Mexico.
Yo, you ain't said shit slick till it came to grease. The shit that be happening to me niggas can't believe. I just made a couple hundred off an art piece. Yo, you ain't said shit slick till it came to grease. The shit that be happening to me niggas can't believe. I just made a couple hundred off an art piece. Feeling like they love me just because I got a heartbeat. Yo, you ain't said shit slick till it came to grease. The shit that be happening to me niggas can't believe. I just made a couple hundred off an art piece. Feeling like they love me just because I got a heartbeat. I cannot be on the phone all the time. Hold up, got a customer that's on the other line. I cannot be concerned with your time. I'm too focused on what's going on in mine. Goddamn, I've been feeling like the man of the year. I'm saying I cannot say I'm a man of the fear. My man, if I hear you complain in my ear, I'ma tell you something that you really ain't want to hear. Like, you ain't gonna make it if you negative. With that attitude, nothing is a go. They thought I wasn't gonna make it, that's a negative. I just thought you should know. Oh, niggas mad at the way I live my life. Swear I'm doing everything right, getting good news after good news after good news. A prince turning to a king, making good moves. Yeah. A prince turning to a king, making good moves. She said a princess turned into a queen for good, dude. I'ma have to be a coach cause you can't beat me. Shit don't happen like a fairy tale, this ain't TV. They said that I don't be moving but they can't be me. Like damn, I just found out I'm in A3C. How you figure? How you figure, my nigga? Everybody said they gon' make it. How you different, my nigga? Ask baby girl what she wanna do with her lifespan. She said rule the world, do it all with the right man. Shit, I can dig it, I need positivity. If I don't get it, I ain't with it. Cooking, and I just put the butter in the skillet. I was quiet, but now they call me Dennis fucking Menace. Making noise, I'm making noise, I'm making noise. Tell them boys, they null and void. I feel the void already. Chillin', eating up spaghetti. Legends know about me already. Oh, niggas mad at the way I live my life. Swear I'm doing everything right, getting good news after good news after good news. A prince turning to a king, making good moves. Yeah. A prince turned into a king, making good moves. She said a princess turned into a queen for good.